Hi, everyone. First, I wanted to thank Florian for having me today. This is the very first Design Korea event, so I'm really honored to be one of the first speakers talking on that event. When Florian first contacted me, I was a bit surprised because, this is the very first design event he's hosting, but it really makes sense. I'm a UX UI designer, so I work with development teams every day. And we tend to think of designers and developers working kind of separately, but I mean, we're all trying to build the same product in the end, so we should have this conversation. So thank you for giving us that space. Just a quick introduction about me. So for those who don't know me, I'm Inès Gruhier. I'm French. I moved to Korea when I was 18 years old, so that was about 7 to 8 years prior to that. So I came here in Korea, I learned the language, and then I went to university. I graduated from university, and right after that, I opened my own company here. So I didn't work in a company before. Right away, I decided to work freelance. And so I founded Odubu Design, which is, for now, what is a one-person design studio. So I primarily focus on UX UI, but also work on design systems, branding, illustration, web dev, prototyping, anything you can think of when you think of design. And so I do client work, but I also work on my own products. So that means that I have shipped 3 mobile games and 2 apps in 3 years. If you work in UX UI, you might have heard of Mobin. So Mobin is a very famous platform for designers, which is basically a collection of every single screen of almost every app you can think of. And I am one of the co-contributors. I was the first one to contribute Korean apps to the platform. Back then, there were only Western apps. So that's why if you see more and more Korean apps, I'm one of the people who contribute Korean apps to Mobin. So I'm not going to show you too much of my portfolio today. I'm just going to show you a glimpse of it, because I really want to focus today's talk on the actual topic, which is Figma MCP. But I use Figma every single day, and I do use Figma MCP more and more with Claude. So yeah, just to showing you the extent of my work. Yeah, if you want to see more of it, I did put my QR code. I'm going to put it again at the end. So we've all seen those memes, right? It's the famous conflict between designers and devs. Who here is a designer? Okay, quite a lot. And do we have devs here? Okay, so yeah, I expected actually more devs than designers. So that's really interesting. But I mean, most of you probably have seen those memes and can relate to that. And they're kind of funny and viral because there is some truth to that. You have the designer who spends a lot of time on the UI, making something beautiful, lots of animation, blur, shadow, everything you can think of. And then, you get to build it, right? And that's the hardest part. So I've also experienced that in my own work. So last year, I was working for a client who wanted me to redesign the onboarding screen, so the very first one. And we had something quite complex at that time, and they asked me to simplify it. So I did the design. It got approved by, the CEO, by everyone, the product team, the stakeholders, investors. So I sent it to the dev implemented it, and they asked me to do the design QA. So I download the app on test flight, I open it, and it's like nothing like Figma. So the sizes, the font sizes, the paddings, everything was wrong. And so I sent him a message on Slack to the dev saying, can you get it closer to Figma? I did not even ask for pixel perfect implementation, just get it closer. And that was his answer. It was, can you make the life a little easy, Inès, request? I thought that was kind of funny because I think it really sums up the whole kind of conflict we have with the devs. And you could ask yourself, is that a competence issue on either end? Maybe I did a design without thinking at all about the technical restrictions, or maybe he just didn't do his job right. Well, I don't think any of us was wrong. I think there is actually a translation gap. So he's a great developer, I know that. So it was not an error on his part. And what I did was actually more simple than what we had before. But the thing is, like, the tools that we use as designers and developers, they don't speak to each other. We use different mediums. So, Figma shows the visual design, how it's supposed to look like on a certain screen size. We do make it responsive, but you tend to design always on the same screen size. And it's beautiful, it makes sense, it's intuitive. And then there's the code who shows the behavior. So it's very different. You work with real data. What happens actually when you click, the API calls that you have to make. It's just very completely different behavior. And yeah, the tools just don't speak to each other. So it's really hard to, you have something in theory and you have something in practice. So yeah, that gap is where all the frustration is living. So it's been very frustrating in the past to work only on Figma, but now the Figma MCP actually bridges that gap. So quickly, what is in Figma MCP? So MCP means Model Context Protocol. It's a very complex term just to say that when you use an AI agent, like Claude Code, for example, it makes the connection with the other tool that you're using. So here, Figma MCP, when you use it with Claude, it allows Claude to read your Figma file. So your design system, your components, your layers, the variables, everything that you have in Figma, it reads that and it can generate code out of that. And now we even have that the other way around, where you can generate code with Claude and then you can bring it back to Figma. But I'm not going to talk about that today. I want to show you actually real life examples of how I use that in my work. So the very first one would be to build interactive components and prototypes. So here we have a very simple component, a toggle. So it just turns on and off, right? I mean, it's a component like you've seen in many different apps, but I wanted to do something a little bit different when you click on it. So when you click on it, it switches the position of the switch, but also changes the color. And I wanted to add some animation to that. So I wanted it to kind of squish when it goes to the other end. And in order to do that in Figma, it would be a lot of trial error because you can do that, but it takes a lot of time because you have to go back and forth with the prototype panel, and it's never perfect. It doesn't behave exactly like how you want. So what I did is that I built a prototype with Claude Code. So I linked the Figma MCP to Claude. I fitted my design and I asked it to build that page on the Next.js project. And I asked it to add an animation debug panel. So what it is that you add sliders for each animation spec. So here you can see duration, compress, overshoot, stiffness, damping. You can add everything you can think of. And I get to play around with it. So that is much more user-friendly than just trying to figure it out in Figma, because you kind of have to have the exact idea in your head. And I even add a slow mode so that I can see how it actually looks. Making sure that I can copy the specs too, and so that I can just send that to the dev. So I deploy that in Versal and share it with the dev. And the next day, it was in test flight and it was perfect, right variables, everything. The communication was much, much faster. We didn't need to have rounds and rounds of design QA. But that is a very simple thing that I could have done in Figma, right? Well, he was still happy about it. Like, he was just, awesome, thanks. But you can actually build things that you cannot build in Figma. So I want to share another example here. where I told you that I have shipped mobile games before. Actually, the very first mobile game I shipped was 3 years ago. It was my graduation project for Hongik University. And it was a game called My Tiny Room, where you have this little tiny room where you can add objects, items, characters, you can rotate them, place them however you want. So think Animal Crossing, Sims, all of that. But that was 3 years ago, and this year I'm rebuilding it from scratch. And I really want to focus a lot on the actual user experience, because we only had 3 months to build it before. Now there is no deadline, so much more freedom. And so we have this room, right? So this is this way simplified version of the UI. But what we currently have and what we had before in the beta app is that you have the inventory panel and you have the objects, and when you click on one item, it just drops in the room. And so there's just translate and opacity animation, nothing crazy. But in the games I've always played and always liked, it's quite animation heavy. So I wanted to do something similar. What I wanted is that when you click on an item, not only does it drop, but when it reaches the floor, once again, it kind of squishes and bounces a bit. And in order to do that in Figma, well, it would take a long time because you have to create all of the different transitions, and it would just take forever. And when you build a game with hundreds of game assets, you cannot really do that. It's just a waste of time. So what I did is that I first designed a very simplified version of the UI in Figma, and then I went back to Claude. So, I've used Claude quite a lot, and some of you might have this experience where sometimes you just use Claude in the terminal, for example, and you write a prompt that is way too simple, so it doesn't really fully capture what you want. So you have to say, hey, can you fix this? Can you improve this? Can you add that? Remove that? It's just a lot of back and forth, and it's really a waste of time, and you just burn all of your tokens, and then you have to wait for the next day. So now I know how to do it properly, and now I ask Claude, so in the desktop app, to just write it for me. So like I just did with you right now, I just explained exactly what I wanted to do. I add a screenshot of my design, and basically it writes the prompt for me, but I ask it to write 3 different prompts. Because before, it used to write just one that was super, super complex. So it doesn't build it properly. I have to keep asking to fix stuff. So now I just split it into 3. So the first one is building the UI. The second one is doing the job animation, so what we currently have in the app. And the third one is the squish animation, so what I actually want to build. So I'm going to walk you through it. So very, very first step, it's just enabling the MCP. I create a Next.js project. The reason I do React, although we're building a Flutter app here, is that it's just easier for me to check the actual CSS and fix anything I wanna fix. And also, it allows me to just deploy it on Vercel and just share the URL to the dev. So I do that, and then I send the first prompt, and this is the results. So right away, exactly what I had in Figma, because I set it up properly. And I send the second one. It does exactly what I want. Then I send the third one, which I was a bit nervous about, but actually it does it perfectly. So I was surprised. It was just a bit too dramatic for me, so I asked it to tone it down. But here is the results. I have the debug panel that I asked for, where I can play around with the duration, distance, the scale, the easing, and this is exactly what I wanted. So I can just share that to the dev, the deployed version, the code if they need it, although they're building something in a different framework. And the next day, here's what I have in the actual app. Exactly what I wanted, even better, because we have items on top of each other, which is something I did not account for. But when, let's say, you have the character on top of the sofa drops first, and the character squishes on top of it. So yeah, if I were to do that in Figma, I don't think I could have done that. I would have to do like one specific instance with one item. And this just allows me to work faster, to exactly show the dev what I want, and yeah, just play around with the prototype. Because in the past, what I would have done is that I would probably have done a frame-by-frame animation to show them what I want, which is very time-consuming. So that is one use case. But you might think, okay, well, cool, you can make squishy animation, but is there more to that? There is a lot of different use cases. So now, we even have cloud design. A lot of people love to talk about that, say designers are cooked is the end. I disagree. But the thing is, like, on social media, you only see the pretty side, the sexy side of the Figma MCP. So just UI generation, code generation. But it's very surface level. You can do much more than that. And something I discovered recently was you can do a full design system audit and documentation with the Figma MCP. And I think that is very powerful, especially if you work on a larger scale project. So I want to talk about this one. So I work for Blockly, which is a fintech in America. And I've been working with them for 3 years now. We first had no design system at all, no brand identity, no logo, nothing. And last year, we actually had an in-house team doing the full rebrand of the whole company. And new rebrand means we also now need a new design system to align with the identity. So here I am now in Figma, rebuilding every single component from scratch. And of course, I have to document it at some point, right? Because even to onboard other designers, we need some proper documentation. And even for the devs, we do also need documentation so that, you don't go on Figma or in the code base and just have to figure it out. So here, this is a very simple example, but which is actually quite complex. So we have a text input, right? So you just click on it and type stuff. And there is a lot of different variants. We want to add an icon sometimes not, an X button, we have error states, all of that. And to document that, it takes a long time. So what I first did is that I opened Cursor. I actually did that for another component first. And I make sure the MCP is enabled. I send the link to my Figma component and say, first, do you see it? It sees it. I ask it to compare it to the code. So to make sure that is there any mismatch, for example, paddings, variables, all of that, like does it exactly match Figma? And most of it does. So that's kind of expected, but that is great to know. And there were some issues. So there was a padding issue. There was a ring on the error states that I removed from Figma. I did tell the dev, but just on Slack. So it kind of forgot about that. And it was still in the code. And there was an issue with the label as well. He asked me if I wanted to modify the code. I said no, I'm just a designer here. I'm not trying to fix the code. But I do want to document it. So I asked it to add, like a table for the variables, the best practices, do's and don'ts, everything that makes sense for the designers, and also add code snippets for the devs if they have to also read it. And it did it, so it's just a markdown, and I can read it. And everything made sense to me. It did add a C to do for the changes that needed to be applied on the dev side. I just asked, yeah, if they could just improve some parts of it, just for me to, so it's easier to read. And then there was this very interesting thing, you know, because I expected it to find some dev issues, but I did not expect to find issues on my end. So I saw this where there was this background override thing. I read a bit and I noticed, oh yeah, I did mention that on a call a long time ago on Slack. We have this input field when it's on top of a normal screen with the background. I mean, there is no bottom sheet. It behaves that way. And then when you put it in a bottom sheet in light mode, it looks exactly the same. But in dark mode, it has to be different. Right now, we don't see because of the contrast of the screen sharing. But on the screen where it says enter your name, the background is fully black. The bottom shade is a dark gray, which is the exact same color as my input, so you don't see it. So I don't know if you can see the difference here, but on Figma, I made it a tiny bit lighter. And of course, that means that you need to change a variable for that. I mentioned that to the dev on a call and said, yeah, sure, I'm gonna handle this on my side. And they did do that, but I forgot to add a variant on Figma. And that's what Claude told me. He said that's not on Figma, actually. So that was really interesting to see that it can be used as a bi-directional tool, is that not only does it helps the devs know what doesn't match in Figma, it also helps you as a designer, the use cases that you missed. And that is a very simple example. Okay, when you work on a full flow, you can find much more mismatches. So in the end, why use Figma MCP? Well, there are many different use cases, as I said, for Figma MCP. First of all, when you get to build prototypes that you would take much more time to build in Figma, you get to control the output. So that, you know, you can build the debug panels to play around with it. It forces you to think about behavior also, rather than just visuals, which I think is interesting because you're working with actual code. You can iterate much faster too. And also you're not waiting for the dev feedback to prototype. You can like think ahead. And as a result, the miscommunication drops drastically. You don't need to explain, like add tons and tons of annotation on Figma for them to understand what you want. You don't need to make kind of okay prototypes. They build it exactly like it's on Figma and you say, oh, but that's not actually what I wanted. And yeah, the collaboration just shifts from interpretation to just refinement. So, and there are many ways, like use cases for it. These are just a few of them, and I'm sure I'm gonna find more. But there are some best practices, you know, things you should do and shouldn't do. Because some of you might have tried and said, oh, but it doesn't look at all like my Figma, like, why even use that? But actually, you need to do a few things to make it work. Because all the examples that I showed you, in just one prompt, it replicated the UI perfectly. First of all, you need to name your layers. Okay, these are actual screenshots from my own Figma files. Like you have like millions of frames. Don't feed that to Claude because then they have to just guess what it is based on the content. So just name them. I know it can be very tedious. So you can just right-click on the main frame, click rename layers, and Figma will do it for you. Sometimes it's not perfect, but that's still, gaining a lot of time. Then create components. This is a non-negotiable for me now. And make sure that all your properties are named properly, so it just makes sense. Like anyone who sees that should understand what it actually does. Next, set up variable collections. So when I first started using Figma, variables were not a thing. So we only had color styles, but now you can build variable collections. So what it does is you can have one mode light mode, dark mode, modes for different brands, anything you want. You can build color tokens, but also like for spacing, like numbers. And if you don't know where to start, there are a lot of different files in the community. For example, if you want to just use like ChatCN, for example, you can open one of the files from the community and use this plugin called export import variables, where what it does is just it exports the variables as a JSON, and you can import them on any other file. And I do that sometimes. And also, yeah, because you're probably going to use that with React prototypes. So using Tailwind CSS and ChatCN variables like really helps a lot because it recognizes the classes. So now where to start? Well, I would really encourage you to start small, because if you build like a full app with tons of different features, you might get discouraged at first. So pick a component, pick a simple screen, try to play with it, add, if you want to add animations, add debug panels, and just see what it does. As I said earlier, try to get Claude to write your prompts for you. I think it will help you a lot, especially if it's not your first language, like for me. Then if you can, try to get developer feedback, because you might do something for the web. You might build an app, like mobile app, but your prototype is going to be on the web, so sometimes it just behaves differently. Then iterate, so just keep doing, fail a lot, try again, and yeah, increase complexity over time. If you don't even know how to set up Figma MCP, I did prepare a tutorial for you. I didn't want to show everything here because some of you might know. So if you just scan this QR code, there will be a Google form. You just have to enter your email and then we'll send you the setup tutorial. And yeah, basically that is it. So if you want to connect with me, this is my portfolio. You have all my information in the footer. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. Do we have any question related to Figma and yep? I asked you before, but I was saving it for this presentation. So remote or local MCP? What do you prefer, and have you noticed any difference in either of those?
Well, first, you've seen in my screenshot that I've always used Claude in the terminal. I tried to use also it in the desktop app. For me, it was a bit more actually, like in terms of interface, it's easier for me to understand, but it was just harder. This is just a remote server here that I set up.
Okay. So, but you have Figma open and you enable the MCP in Figma, or?
Yeah, I think now it does it almost automatically. Like when it first launched, it was a bit complex to set up. But now all you need to do is when you go on Claude, you install the MCP, and then it just asks you to authenticate. And as long as your desktop app is open, then you can just read it perfectly.
Yeah. Have you ever encountered any rate limiting? Because I have. Like if you try to do, if you try to do the whole page that has hundreds of views,
yeah,
it cannot do.
Yeah, that's why I usually start smaller. So if you work on a web design, for example, like a really long landing page, I tend to work by section rather than just say, hey, build me the whole thing. Same with the whole flow in the mobile app. I tend to do screen by screen. I find it easier that way, or even component by component. So it is taking more time, but in the end, you're saving tokens as well, because you don't have to say, hey, can you fix this and this and that? And
yeah. Thanks. I'll let others.
But I am on Claude Pro, not even Max, and I rarely hit the limits because my use cases are kind of smaller than if I were to build an whole app.
Yeah, because I tried. I gave the whole page and I asked it to analyze all the views, which Claude can do, but the Figma doesn't allow. If you call so many times get get context on the MCP, it just starts to limit you that you cannot and you need to wait.
Okay.
But that's like if you really try to do, instead of going few views, you do whole project, whole page with all the flows, and then you want to kind of plan everything out, the whole app. It seems like it doesn't like that. From my experience.
I can imagine. You probably have to work flow by flow or screen by screen.
Split it up, yeah.
Can you activate? Oh, yeah, sorry.
When you were talking about the text input field and then the background contrast not like matching up in Figma, whereas code was right.
Yes.
And then you said Claude let you know, right? So I was wondering, from my understanding right now, MCP, if you use it, it can't read like your entire Figma file. You have to guide it to a certain node.
Yeah.
How did it like kind of catch that error or that like that Figma wasn't updated?
Yeah, so basically I linked it to one component. So in the component, you have all the different variants, right? And in the code base, it was linked to one specific file. So for that specific project, I'm actually using the organization tier. So I have Code Connect in Figma. So it allows you to basically link your whole repository to Figma, and you can link one specific file from your code to one specific component. But you don't have to do that though. In the component file in the repo, so on the code side, it had that use case handled, like in that file. And it noticed that there was no variant for that at all in Figma, so that's how it caught the issue.
Okay. I think I understand. Yeah. And then do you think like I know you've been like talking about like design and then prototyping, but like where do you think design is gonna go with AI in terms of like, why stop at prototyping? Why not just like have Claude or Codex do the whole thing?
Yeah, that's a good question. I've had a lot of developers actually ask me what I think of the future of design and why don't you just code at this point? And we've been asked that for years, like should designers learn to code? I don't think you need to learn to code, but you do need to know a bit of the limitations and the technical constraints for you to be a better designer. I don't think everyone needs to code. I mean, you can if you want to, but building a whole app and designing it, I think, are two different jobs. And I don't think we all need to be builders. So if that's your thing, great, but I don't think that's where we're going. Yeah, you will have more people like build apps and without having any domain knowledge, but I think there's still a place for specialists in one specific domain. We do need experts, and if you're an expert in development, you don't need to know much about design, and vice versa. I think you don't need to, yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah. Can you pass it
on? Thank you for the presentation. And actually, I have a question about your career. I noticed that a lot of people actually, after graduation, they try to get a job.
Yeah.
They enter the workforce. But in your case, you establish your own company. Like, how so?
Yeah, that's a good question, because especially as a foreigner, right, you don't have a lot of examples of people like just building, especially in design, like an agency. Well, I had the option to either find a job or create my own. And I think for me, it was a bit more appealing to work for myself than to work for others. And I had the opportunity to do so. I mean, you have lots of different visa types, right? And I had the opportunity to have one to build my own company. So that wasn't even a question for me back then, because I want to work remote. I love the whole like lifestyle. And I don't know if I would fit perfectly in the Korean work culture too. I've been living here for a long time, but there are still things that I think don't match with me. So far, at least I'm enjoying it. We'll see how it goes in the future.
Thank you.
The way I understand, the MCP can only view your Figma projects, but it takes a lot of time to wireframe ideas on Figma. Did you find a way to use AI to edit directly on Figma, so you don't have to just do it all by yourself?
I tried, and it turns out that I'm faster than AI sometimes. Because the thing is, AI can generate UI. You have Figma Make. You can do that also with Claude and with Lovable Replace, like many kinds of softwares. But I've never really was satisfied with the end result, so I ended up like doing it all over again. So in the end, I'm just saving time by doing it myself.
Okay.
Yeah, but there might be ways of automating some stuff in the future. For example, like build a whole design system and you just like edit the actual look of it. I'm interested in that, but so far I haven't found a great tool for that.
Thank you.
We have one last question. Thanks.
I have a question about the game prototype that you had done. Or when you were making that prototype, did you set up all the agency and like harness, all that design, or did you just buy the code with Claude?
Oh, the very first game?
Yes,
Yeah.
the interior, right? The room one.
The one I just showed you? When I built the prototype?
Yeah.
So what I did, let me show you again. So every item is hand-drawn, actually. I drew that on my iPad. The UI is just made on Figma, but I did not build a full design system yet. This is still like very like early stages. So we'll have to do that. But yeah, all that are just PNGs actually. Something I forgot to mention is that this is not at all like Unity or like actual 3D. This is just like simulation. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, last one.
Thank you for the presentation. Actually, this was really helpful as a designer. So as I understand, if I understand correctly, you're using Figma MCP and Cloud Code to deliver your design like more accurately, like to hand over faster. So my question is, maybe it's a question for the developer friends here, but can developer actually use your code that you made with like Cloud Code? Like,
That's a great
can they
question.
like reuse the code?
That's a great question. I thought not in the beginning when I first started doing that. I thought it was just, for them to have like a visual reference. But actually, every developer I worked with asked me for the code, and they kind of all used it in a way. What's interesting is that everything I built was made with React, but the actual end product was never a React website. But they still ask for the code just to like see actually how it's built and reference it, or even just feed it to Claude and make a Flutter or whatever version. So I think so, at least from the feedback I've received, yeah.
That's cool. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. And for more questions to Inès, you can talk to her during the networking. Thank you so much.
Thank you.